La parole est à M. Tosebr, rapporteur de la Commission des questions politiques, 8 minutes.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the resignation of the European Commission on the 16th of March 1999 and the street demonstrations in Seattle during the Third Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization come to show that it is time to have a serious debate addressing the problem with the functioning of international institutions. It's a fact that most of the people are not aware of the purpose and the work of these organizations and the reason for their existence. More often than not, there are deputies as well who, being directly elected representatives of the people, are not paying sufficient attention to the work of these organizations. In some cases, their access to information or enough information for some international institutions is very difficult and complicated. This is obviously unacceptable. In this way, the gap between international institutions and the society is increasing. The lack of transparency in such cases leads to lack of understanding and further lack of public support for their activities. Due to a number of problems on a continental and global scale, which call for strengthening of the effectiveness of national policies and much greater cooperation, the success of the existing institutions in addressing this issue is of paramount importance. The parliamentary scrutiny and involvement in the work of the international institutions, as well as their openness to the media and NGOs, could make these institutions more accountable. This could make the decision-making process more transparent and therefore lead to promote public interest to their work and further support to their aims. Some time ago, I had a discussion on the issue with Ms. Marta Ruedas from the United Nations Development Programme, and her opinion was that the parliamentarians could achieve those general goals most effectively if they strengthened their control over those who exercise the power, with, in other words, their representatives in the governments in these institutions. I entirely agree with the view expressed by Ms. Ruedas because it is both a right and duty of the MPs to hold regular debates in their national parliaments and their relevant committees on the various aspects of the work of international organizations. The deputies have the right to receive information and to consider the work of their national representatives there. The second aspect which I would like to touch upon now is the direct involvement of the parliamentarians in the work of international institutions through the parliamentary assemblies. This report and the report of Mrs. Severinsen too underline the importance and need for a parliamentary dimension of the United Nations through including parliamentarians from the government majority and from the opposition in the national delegations to UN General Assembly. Few member states, even of the Council of Europe, have deputies in their delegations to the General Assembly of United Nations. But I would like to say here that there is a need to improve the interaction between the national delegations to the parliamentary assemblies and the committees in their national parliaments. In this respect, I would like to recall the initiative launched at the 6th Conference of the Mediterranean and Black Sea Basins, the so-called Varna process. It was proposed that under the auspices of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, the committees from the national parliaments of members and even non-member states meet together and hold debate on some specific issues. In my opinion, it was a good idea and it should not be forsaken. The third aspect is that some international organizations, such as the World Trade Organization, do not have a parliamentary dimension. At the joint meeting in Canada in 2001, the common position of the representatives of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and Canadian deputies was reached that it is a good idea to support IPU for the establishment of a Parliamentary Assembly of the World Trade Organization. While the Committee on Economic Affairs and Development of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe considers the work of OECD and EBRD on a regular basis, and the Assembly frequently has debates on these affairs, some other organizations like the World Bank and European Investment Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which work is debating in this Assembly even today, definitely need much greater parliamentary scrutiny. It is strongly recommendable that the work of and budgets of the various international financial institutions be discussed in the national parliamentary budgetary and financial committees. Returning back to the continental level, we would like to commend the role of the European Parliament as the first directly elected international parliamentary institution whose powers should be enhanced. We call upon the European Parliament to strengthen its cooperation with the national parliaments who are responsible for the adoption of national legislation, and in this respect, the ideas to create an upper chamber of the European Parliament representing the national parliaments or a parliamentary assembly of the European Union scrutinizing the work of European institutions should be carefully considered. In fact, the amendment proposed today by Mr. David Atkinson is combining the both options, suggesting creation of an upper chamber of European Parliament, but not as additional complicated level of the EU decision-making process, but as parliamentary body for scrutinizing the policy of European Union. In conclusion, I would like to say that our Assembly should continue to consistently raise these issues, and as a follow-up of today's debate, specific steps and action need to be undertaken, especially a discussion on this matter in the national parliaments. Our recommendations are aimed at returning international organizations back to the citizens to whom they belong. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Toshev. I call Mrs.